In a grand estate nestled behind tall, ivy-draped walls in the heart of a wealthy neighborhood lived billionaire Raymond Sterling. Once hailed as a tech visionary, he had built his empire from scratch, retiring early with more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. But all the wealth in the world couldn't mask the growing emptiness in his heart. His mansion was vast but quiet, his days structured but lonely. His mornings were filled with newspaper clippings and lukewarm tea, and his evenings ended with a solitary game of chess against a computer that could never surprise him. Despite his immense success, Raymond was not known to be arrogant. He was quiet, reclusive, and sharp-eyed. His only consistent human interaction came from his longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Elena Marquez, a middle-aged woman with a kind heart and firm hands. Elena had been working at the Sterling mansion for nearly a decade. She was more than just a housekeeper. She managed the entire estate, often caring for Raymond with the gentle concern of a family member, though she never overstepped her role. She was fiercely loyal, and in return, Raymond trusted her in ways he trusted no one else. Every now and then, Elena brought her 12-year-old daughter, Lena, to the mansion when she couldn't find someone to watch over her. Lena was quiet, almost ghost-like in the way she moved around the mansion. She never ran, never yelled, never touched anything without permission. Instead, she often sat in a corner of the library or by a window in the kitchen, reading old novels or scribbling in a worn sketch pad. Raymond had noticed her a few times, a small figure in faded clothes and neat braids, always observing, always listening, but he paid her little mind. One rainy Thursday afternoon, the storm clouds cast a silvery gloom across the estate. Thunder rolled lazily in the distance as Raymond sat in the library with a half-played chess game in front of him. He was midway through a match against an online AI, but he'd already grown bored. The computer played perfectly, yet predictably. There was no spark, no unpredictability, no soul. He sighed, pushing back from the board, just as he caught movement from the corner of his eye. There sat Lena, curled up on the window seat, watching the rain as her fingers traced invisible shapes on the glass. Her gaze briefly flicked to the chessboard, then back to the storm outside. Something about the look in her eyes, focused, curious, stirred a sliver of curiosity in Raymond. Standing, he cleared his throat. "You ever play chess, young lady?" he asked, not expecting much of a reply. Lena turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "A little," she said softly. Raymond raised an eyebrow, amused. "A little, huh? Would you like to try a game?" There was a pause, as if Lena was gauging whether this was a real invitation or some polite joke. Then she nodded and slid off. The window seat. She approached the board carefully, respectfully, and sat across from him. Her eyes scanned the board with subtle intensity. "I'll play white," she said gently, already repositioning the pieces. "If that's okay." Raymond chuckled and leaned back in his chair. "Be my guest." The game began quietly. Lena moved fast, not in a rushed, impulsive way, but with certainty, like someone who had already played out the possibilities in her mind. Raymond, intrigued, responded cautiously, curious to see how far she could go. At first, he assumed it was a child's luck or memorized openings. But within 5 minutes, it became clear. This wasn't mere play. She was reading his moves before he made them, closing off his routes, controlling the center, drawing him into traps that didn't look like traps until he walked into them. After 15 moves, Raymond sat up straighter. After 20, he was fully engaged. Gone was the air of gentle indulgence. Now he was defending himself like he did in the toughest matches of his youth. Lena didn't speak during the game. Her fingers moved with calm precision, her eyes focused, her face expressionless. Her style was aggressive but elegant, not reckless. But daring. 30-5 minutes into the game, she tilted her head slightly, placed a knight delicately forward, and looked at him. "Checkmate," she said, barely above a whisper. Raymond froze. He looked at the board, then again, leaning closer to trace the pattern of her attack. She had cornered his king with such graceful complexity that he hadn't even realized he was out of options until the end. He looked at her, blinking. "Where on earth did you learn to play like that?" Lena shrugged lightly. "From books and online. Mama gave me an old phone. I watch videos, puzzles, famous games." Raymond was stunned. "No lessons? No teacher?" She shook her head. "Just practice. I like solving things." Elena walked into the room then, startled to find her daughter seated at her employer's chess table. "I'm so sorry, sir." "I didn't mean for her to bother you." "She didn't," Raymond interrupted gently, still staring at Lena. "She didn't bother me at all. In fact, I think your daughter just gave me the most interesting match I've played in years." Elena looked puzzled. "Oh, she plays sometimes, but it's just a hobby." "Hobby?" Raymond laughed under his breath, shaking his head in disbelief. "That's no hobby. That's talent. No, that's something more. Your daughter is extraordinary." Lena blushed and looked down, folding her hands in her lap. That night, Raymond couldn't sleep. The image of the young girl moving her knight with quiet confidence haunted him. There was something deeply poetic in the moment. The old lonely billionaire, defeated at his own favorite game by the quiet daughter of the woman who dusted his bookshelves. It wasn't just the game. It was the look in her eyes, that spark, that brilliance, that hunger to learn. He hadn't seen it in anyone for years. He spent the next morning researching young chess players, prodigies, and national rankings. He reviewed the moves she made during their match, and the deeper he looked, the more convinced he became that Lena's mind worked differently. She didn't memorize strategies. She understood the language of chess, intuitively and creatively. Later that week, Raymond requested Elena come into the study for a private conversation. Nervous, she stood before him, wringing her hands. "Elena," he began, "I have a request, and I hope you'll take it seriously." She nodded, unsure. "Your daughter, Lena, she's gifted. Not just talented. She sees the board in ways most people don't. I'd like to sponsor her chess training. Hire a professional coach, get her registered in local tournaments, and see where it goes." Elena's eyes widened. "Sir, that's very generous, but I can't afford." "I'm not asking for money," Raymond said firmly. "I'm offering it as a gift, a chance, because she deserves it." Tears welled up in Elena's eyes. She looked torn, caught between gratitude and disbelief. "May I ask why?" she whispered. Raymond smiled. "Because years ago, someone saw potential in me when no one else did. That belief changed my life. Lena reminded me of that spark. And I want to give her what I was given, a chance to be more than what the world expects." That evening, Raymond invited Lena for another match. This time, she smiled more, relaxed a little, though her game was just as sharp. Over the next few days, he began to talk to her more, not just about chess, but about books, puzzles, and her dreams. She told him she liked solving riddles, drawing strategy maps, and watching world championship matches late at night when her mother thought she was asleep. Raymond listened, fascinated. In Lena's eyes, he saw not just a gifted child, but a mind destined to soar, if only it had the wings. What began as a casual, rainy day match had now become the turning point in all their lives. For the billionaire who thought he had seen it all, a quiet girl in second-hand shoes had opened a door to something new, a purpose, a passion, a chance to nurture genius. And for Lena, who had grown up quietly in the shadows of the rich, the spotlight was just beginning to shift toward her. What neither of them knew, however, was that this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge, inspire, and ultimately transform them both on a world stage far grander than either of them could imagine. The decision to sponsor Lena's training was made quietly but firmly. Within days, Raymond Sterling had hired a renowned chess coach, Master Julian Vance, a stern but brilliant man known for training international-level players. When Vance first visited the mansion and was told his new student was a 12-year-old girl from a working-class family, he arrived with an eyebrow raised, a smirk tugging at his lips, and zero expectations. But within 20 minutes of their first session, he knew he had misjudged her. Lena wasn't just smart, she was frighteningly intuitive. She didn't just learn quickly. She absorbed knowledge like a sponge and often found solutions to puzzles even he hadn't considered. Her ability to visualize multiple outcomes 10 steps ahead stunned him. By the end of the second week, Julian called Raymond privately and said, "I've trained national champions. Your girl, she has something I've never seen before. She's not just skilled, she's special." Raymond had never been prouder of a decision. The quiet afternoons that used to drag endlessly now buzzed with life. Lena practiced daily, balancing strategy with precision, discipline with creativity. She was still soft-spoken, still humble, but now her eyes lit up with confidence. He also made sure her academics didn't fall behind. A private tutor was hired to homeschool her, blending regular subjects with logic-building games, critical thinking exercises, and books about psychology and game theory. Lena's world, which had once stretched only as far as her mother's tiny apartment, had expanded beyond imagination. Elena, at first overwhelmed by the sudden shift, slowly began to trust the process. She was hesitant about accepting charity, but Raymond was patient. He reminded her again and again, this wasn't charity. It was an investment in a brilliant mind. And when Elena saw her daughter smile in ways she never had before, when she heard her talk about dreams of grandmasters and tournaments and mental battles played in silence, she knew they had stepped into something extraordinary. Months passed. Lena began to compete in regional tournaments under a pseudonym to avoid the media attention that would come with her unusual background. And at every competition, she swept the field, beating older players, boys with years of coaching, and even local champions who laughed when they saw her name on the bracket. She never gloated. She simply shook hands and thanked her opponents politely. Word began to spread. Who is this girl? Where did she come from? Chess circles buzzed with speculation. Some thought she must be the daughter of a secret grandmaster. Others claimed she had studied under AI engines in isolation. But the truth remained hidden that a billionaire had once invited a housekeeper's daughter to play a game for fun and unknowingly unlocked a star. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging match in a state-level qualifier, Raymond found Lena sitting alone in the garden, knees drawn to her chest, her expression distant. "You won," he said, walking over. "What's wrong?" She looked up at him, conflicted. "I heard some of the other kids talking. They said I don't belong in the tournaments, that I'm pretending to be one of them." Raymond sat beside her and sighed. "Lena, when people see something they can't explain, something that breaks their idea of what's normal, it scares them. And when people are scared, they say foolish things." "But they're right," she whispered. "I'm not like them. I don't come from money. I don't have a family name. Sometimes I wonder, if I wasn't lucky enough to meet you, would any of this be happening?" Raymond reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old photo, himself as a tall-less young man standing outside a cheap apartment, holding a second-hand laptop. "I wasn't born with money either," he said. "Everything I became was because one teacher gave me a chance. And you know what he told me?" She shook her head. He said, Don't waste time trying to belong to people who already decided you don't. He looked at her warmly. You're not here to fit in, Lena. You're here to stand out. And that's exactly what you're doing. Lena's eyes welled with tears. She didn't speak, but she leaned gently against his shoulder, and they sat in silence as the wind rustled the trees above. That winter, the call finally came. Lena had qualified by points, merit, and brilliance for the International Junior Grandmasters tournament in Spain. The competition would bring together the world's finest under-16 players, many from prestigious academies, private coaching dynasties, and powerful sponsorships. Lena would be the youngest, the least known, and perhaps the only one with no official federation backing her name. The journey to Spain was surreal. For Elena, it was her first time on an airplane, her first time leaving the country. She clutched her daughter's hand through the takeoff, overwhelmed by the scale of it all. Raymond traveled with them, insisting on handling all arrangements. He had turned from sponsor to mentor, from stranger to family. The tournament hall was grand. Bright lights, velvet ropes, marble floors, and cameras flashing everywhere. Players walked with confidence, some surrounded by teams, trainers, and translators. Lena, in her simple coat and quiet demeanor, didn't attract much attention. Until the first match, she demolished her opponent in 17 moves. The audience gasped. Experts watched replays. Analysts commented on her daring, creative lines. Who is this girl? Trended on chess forums across Europe. Match after match, Lena climbed the bracket. Each opponent tougher, more seasoned, more well-funded. But none could shake her focus. She played with the patience of a monk and the fire of a warrior. Raymond watched every match with bated breath, his heart swelling with pride. Elena couldn't stop crying. Her little girl, who used to solve puzzles in the corner of a dusty mansion, now sat beneath global spotlights, outplaying the best. Finally, she reached the final round. Her opponent was Ivan Malenkov, a 15-year-old Russian sensation, widely expected to win the title. He had trained since he was 3, held 5 junior championship trophies, and came from a family of elite chess players. His expression when he saw Lena across the board was one of smug amusement. The match began. It was unlike any Lena had played before, not because she was nervous, but because Ivan was as relentless as she was. For nearly 2 hours they battled. In silence, each move countered with precision. The game drew a massive crowd. Commentators whispered about Lena's unconventional strategies, her ability to disrupt expected play, to lure her opponent into positions no one else dared attempt. Then, late into the game, Lena paused. A long silence fell over the room. She looked at the board, eyes narrowing. She saw something, a pathway invisible to others. And with 3 bold moves, she dismantled Ivan's defense and closed the game with a shocking checkmate. The room exploded in applause. The audience stood. Ivan stared at the board in disbelief, then offered his hand with a respectful nod. Lena shook it quietly, then stepped down from the platform, trembling not with fear, but joy. She had done it. She was the International Junior Grandmaster. As cameras swarmed her, journalists begged for interviews, and offers for sponsorships and scholarships poured in. Lena didn't forget who was waiting by the door, her mother and the old man who had believed in her. When no one else had, she ran into Elena's arms, first hugging her tightly. Then she turned to Raymond, who simply smiled and opened his arms. She hugged him too, fiercely, whispering, "Thank you." Raymond's voice broke slightly as he replied, "No, Lena, thank you for reminding me what brilliance really is." Months later, back in their home country, Lena stood on stage at a national event honoring youth achievement. Dressed simply, her speech echoed across the silent hall. I didn't come from money. I didn't have a famous coach growing up. What I had was a mother who worked hard and someone who believed in me. Talent can come from anywhere. Genius doesn't wear expensive clothes. All it needs is a chance. I was lucky to get one. My dream is to give that chance to others like me, who are waiting quietly in the corners, unseen. She received a standing ovation. Raymond, sitting beside Elena in the front row, wiped a tear from his cheek. He had spent decades building machines, companies, and fortunes. But nothing had ever made him feel as rich as this moment, watching the girl he once invited to play chess just for fun now inspire a nation.